Welcome to Agatha Christie Tales. Tonight, we venture beyond the ordinary, past the boundaries of the explicable, to a manor house where the strange is celebrated and death wears a most unusual mask. Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective, receives an invitation he cannot refuse to examine a collection of curiosities assembled by one of England's most eccentric gentlemen. But among the peculiar artifacts and impossible specimens, a far darker mystery awaits. Join us for Murder Most Peculiar, a tale of obsession, deception, and a crime that defies all rational explanation, crafted in homage to the masterful Agatha Christie, whose genius we honor, though this enigma unfolds on our own terms. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you joining us from tonight? Your presence illuminates our journey through these shadowed mysteries. Now, let the story unfold. Chapter 1. The Collector's Invitation. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered with the peculiar solemnity that only correspondence of a certain caliber commands. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, observed my friend Hercule Poirot examine the envelope with the methodical precision he applied to all things. "Heavy cream paper," Poirot murmured, turning it in his small, neat hands. "Watermarked. The seal, observe, Hastings, is pressed in black wax. Most unusual. Black suggests either mourning or theatre." "Perhaps both," I offered, settling into the armchair opposite his own. "Perhaps." His green eyes glinted with interest as he slit the envelope with a silver letter opener. The blade caught the morning light streaming through the windows of our Whitehaven Mansions flat. I watched as he unfolded the letter within, his eyebrows performing that familiar dance of rising curiosity, followed by the slight furrow of concentration. After a moment, he passed the letter to me without comment. The handwriting was bold, almost aggressive in its forward slant. "Dear Monsieur Poirot, I write to you not as a man in danger, but as a collector who has acquired something that defies explanation. Among my specimens, my peculiarities as I call them, I have obtained an item that presents a mystery I cannot solve alone. You are by reputation a man who appreciates the inexplicable only insofar as it may be explicable. I believe we share this philosophy. I invite you to Ashworth Hall for a weekend gathering, beginning this Friday. Bring your colleague, Captain Hastings. I am told he provides useful perspective, if occasionally misguided. The mystery I wish to present will, I suspect, intrigue even the famous grey cells. Your servant, Sir Reginald Ashworth, Upting." I looked up, somewhat affronted. "Occasionally misguided?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Sir Reginald, he has done his research, no?" "I say, that's hardly—" Come, mon ami." Poirot rose from his chair, moving to the window with that particular lightness of step that belied his compact frame. "We must not take offense where curiosity is offered. Sir Reginald Ashworth. The name, it is familiar to you?" I considered. "Ashworth. I believe I've read something. Wealthy family, old money. The current baronet is known for collecting oddities, isn't he? Supposed to have quite the cabinet of curiosities." "More than a cabinet, Hastings. Sir Reginald Ashworth possesses one of the most extensive private collections of the unusual in all of England. Specimens that science cannot classify. Artifacts whose origins remain unknown. Devices of impossible mechanism." Poirot turned from the window, silhouetted against the grey London sky. "He is, by all accounts, a man obsessed with that which defies explanation. And he wants you to explain something. Précisément." Poirot touched his moustache thoughtfully. "The irony, it does not escape him, I think. He collects the inexplicable, and now he summons the one man who insists all things may be explained. Will you go?" For a moment, Poirot was silent. Then, "How can I refuse, mon ami? A mystery that intrigues a collector of mysteries. The little grey cells, they are already curious." Ashworth Hall revealed itself through a curtain of autumn mist as our motorcar wound up the long drive that Friday afternoon. The estate lay some 40 miles from London, nestled in the Hampshire countryside where the trees grew thick and ancient, their branches reaching toward one another across the narrow lane like grasping fingers. The hall itself was a formidable structure, Jacobean in origin, I judged, though subsequent generations had added wings and towers in varying styles that lent the building an almost organic quality, as though it had grown rather than been built. Ivy crawled up the eastern face, and gargoyles of unusual design peered down from the roofline, their expressions more curious than menacing. "Quite a pile," I remarked as the car drew to a halt before the main entrance. "A reflection of its owner, one suspects," Poirot replied, adjusting his coat with care. The journey had not been kind to his sense of order. A fallen leaf had attached itself to his sleeve at some point, and he removed it now with an expression of mild distaste. The front door opened before we could approach, revealing a tall, thin butler whose face suggested he had seen many peculiar things and had resolved to be surprised by nothing. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings." His voice was as measured as his expression. "Sir Reginald is expecting you. I am Thompson. If you will follow me." The entrance hall lived up to the exterior's promise of strangeness. Where one might expect ancestral portraits and hunting trophies, the walls, instead, displayed cases containing specimens I could not immediately identify. Creatures preserved in amber-colored fluid, mechanical devices of intricate design, maps of places I did not recognize. A skeleton stood in one corner, and I started before realizing it was not human. The proportions were wrong, the skull too elongated. "Fascinating," Poirot murmured, pausing before a case containing what appeared to be a clockwork bird. "The craftsmanship, it is extraordinary." "Sir Reginald's collection spans 30 years of acquisition," Thompson said without inflection. "The curiosity room contains the most significant pieces. Sir Reginald will show you personally." We were led through a succession of corridors, each lined with further specimens of the strange and unusual, until we emerged into a bright sitting room where a fire crackled welcomingly in a massive stone hearth. Several people were already assembled, and they turned at our entrance with expressions ranging from curiosity to poorly concealed suspicion. "Poirot!" The exclamation came from a large man who rose from a chair near the fire with surprising energy for one of his considerable bulk. Sir Reginald Ashworth was perhaps 60 years of age, with a broad, ruddy face and eyes that sparkled with what I could only describe as mischievous intelligence. His waistcoat was embroidered with small golden beetles, a sartorial choice that seemed entirely appropriate. "Sir Reginald," Poirot extended his hand, "you are most kind to invite us." "Nonsense, nonsense! I've been wanting to meet you for years. The man who solved the Styles affair—" "The Belgian wizard!" Sir Reginald pumped Poirot's hand with enthusiasm. "And Captain Hastings, you must forgive my little joke in the letter. I meant no offense." "None taken," I lied with reasonable grace. "Excellent, excellent. Now, let me introduce you to the rest of our party." Sir Reginald gestured expansively. "My wife, Lady Ashworth." A woman of perhaps 35 rose from the settee, her beauty of the cool, classical variety, pale skin, dark hair swept back elegantly, eyes of a grey that matched the mist outside. She extended her hand to Poirot with the manner of one performing an obligatory courtesy. "Monsieur Poirot, my husband speaks of nothing else these past weeks. Madame, the pleasure is mine entirely. My nephew, Gerald." Sir Reginald's tone cooled perceptibly as he indicated a young man lounging in a chair by the window. Gerald Ashworth was handsome in a dissipated way, with the look of one who had spent too many nights in places of dubious reputation. He raised a languid hand in acknowledgement, but did not rise. "Monsieur Poirot, I suppose you're here to authenticate some dusty relic for my uncle?" "Gerald," Lady Ashworth said, her voice carrying a note of warning. "What?" "It's what he does, isn't it? Examines things, determines truth from falsehood." Gerald's smile did not reach his eyes. "Heaven knows there's enough falsehood in this house." Sir Reginald's expression tightened, but he pressed on. "Dr. Harold Finch, our family physician and old friend." The doctor was a spare, grey-haired man with kind eyes behind wire spectacles. He shook hands warmly. "Delighted, Monsieur Poirot. I've followed your cases with great interest, the medical aspects particularly." "A fellow student of the scientific method," Poirot said approvingly. "And finally," Sir Reginald continued, "Miss Phoebe Strand, my invaluable assistant. She has been cataloguing my collection for the past 2 years. Without her, I should be utterly lost among my own peculiarities." Miss Strand had been standing so quietly by the bookcase that I had not initially noticed her. She was a woman of perhaps 30, plain in feature, but possessed of intelligent brown eyes that seemed to observe everything while revealing nothing. Her dress was simple, her manner modest. "Monsieur Poirot." Her voice was soft, almost diffident. "It is an honor. I have read of your methods with great admiration." "You are too kind, mademoiselle." Poirot inclined his head. "The work of cataloguing such a collection must be most demanding." "It has its challenges." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Sir Reginald's acquisitions do not always conform to conventional classification systems." "Ha! She means I collect things that shouldn't exist." Sir Reginald laughed heartily. "And now I have something that truly shouldn't exist. Something that will test even your famous grey cells, Poirot." "You intrigue me, Sir Reginald." "All in good time, my friend. First we dine. Then I shall show you the curiosity room." Sir Reginald's eyes glittered. "And the item that brought you here? The impossibility I cannot explain." Dinner was an elaborate affair, served in a dining room whose walls displayed yet more specimens, including what appeared to be a 2-headed snake preserved in a jar, which rather put me off my soup. The conversation was dominated by Sir Reginald, who spoke at length about his recent acquisitions and the philosophy that guided his collecting. "Most people," he declared, waving his fork for emphasis, "are afraid of what they cannot explain. They dismiss it, ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist. I take the opposite approach. I embrace the inexplicable. I collect it." "But surely, Sir Reginald," Poirot said mildly, "you must believe that explanation is possible. Otherwise, why summon me?" Sir Reginald's smile was knowing. "Ah, you've caught me out. Yes, I believe explanation is possible, in theory. But I find the search for explanation more fascinating than the explanation itself. The mystery, Poirot, is the thing." "And yet," Gerald interjected, his voice carrying an edge, "some mysteries are better left unsolved. Don't you agree, uncle?" A silence fell over the table. Lady Ashworth's fingers tightened around her wine glass. Dr. Finch cleared his throat. Miss Strand's eyes darted briefly to Sir Reginald, then away. "I don't know what you mean, Gerald," Sir Reginald said coldly. "No, then I apologize." Gerald raised his glass in mock salute. "To mysteries. May they remain forever peculiar." After dinner, as the party fragmented, Lady Ashworth retiring early with complaints of a headache, Gerald disappearing to the billiard room, Dr. Finch retreating with a book, Sir Reginald drew Poirot and me aside. "You must forgive Gerald. He is disappointed. He expected to inherit, you see, but I have recently made changes to my will." "Changes that exclude him?" Poirot inquired. "Changes that recognize those who have truly earned my gratitude." Sir Reginald's expression softened as he glanced toward the doorway through which Miss Strand had passed. "She has been invaluable, Poirot. Utterly invaluable." "I see. But enough of family matters. Come, let me show you why you are truly here." He led us through the labyrinthine corridors, past cases and displays that grew increasingly bizarre until we reached a heavy oak door reinforced with iron bands. Sir Reginald produced a key from his waistcoat pocket and unlocked it with ceremony. "Welcome," he said, pushing the door open, "to the curiosity room." The chamber beyond was perhaps 30 feet square, lined floor to ceiling with glass cases, shelves, and display pedestals. Each surface bore objects that defied immediate comprehension, crystals that seemed to glow within a light, mechanisms of impossible intricacy, preserved specimens that resembled nothing in nature. But it was the central display that drew the eye, a glass case on a marble pedestal illuminated by electric light from above. Inside, resting on velvet, was a sphere approximately 6 inches in diameter. It appeared to be made of some dark metal, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as one looked at them. The Ashworth sphere, Sir Reginald said reverently. I acquired it 3 months ago from a dealer in Constantinople. Its origins are unknown. Its purpose is unknown. Its composition is unknown. It is. Remarkable, Poirot admitted, stepping closer. Watch. Sir Reginald reached into the case and touched the sphere with one finger. Immediately, the patterns on its surface began to move, flowing like liquid metal, rearranging themselves into new configurations. A faint hum filled the room, felt more than heard. Mon Dieu, I breathed. Exactly. Sir Reginald withdrew his hand, and the sphere fell still. I have shown it to metallurgists, physicists, engineers. None can explain how it works. It responds to touch, but only to my touch. For everyone else, it remains inert. You wish me to explain this mechanism? Poirot asked. No, Poirot. I wish you to explain this. Sir Reginald reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded paper. This letter arrived 2 weeks ago. Read it. Poirot took the paper and unfolded it. I read over his shoulder. The sphere is not yours. It was stolen. Return it or face the consequences. You have been warned. No signature, Poirot observed. Posted locally, I see from the postmark. Someone knows, Sir Reginald said, his voice troubled for the first time. Someone knows where the sphere came from, and they want it back. Have you any idea who might have sent this? None. But I feel watched, Poirot, in my own home. That is why you are here, not merely to examine my curiosities, but to ensure that nothing peculiar occurs this weekend. Poirot folded the letter carefully. I understand, Sir Reginald. Rest assured, Hercule Poirot will observe everything. Good, good. Sir Reginald seemed to relax slightly. Now, shall I show you the rest of the collection? There is much here that will interest you. As our host led us deeper into the curiosity room, I noticed Poirot's eyes return again and again to the mysterious sphere and to the shadows that gathered in the corners of that strange chamber. Something peculiar was indeed afoot at Ashworth Hall, and I had the distinct feeling it had only just begun. Chapter 2. Death in the Curiosity Room. I slept poorly that night. Whether it was the unfamiliar bed, the wind that moaned around the old hall's towers, or the lingering unease from Sir Reginald's revelation, I cannot say. But when I finally descended for breakfast the following morning, I found Poirot already seated at the table, a cup of his preferred tisane before him, his expression thoughtful. You did not sleep well, mon ami, he observed as I took my seat. How the devil do you know that? The shadows beneath your eyes, the manner in which you hold your shoulders, and his moustache twitched. You have buttoned your waistcoat incorrectly. The third button, it is in the fourth hole. I glanced down, flushing slightly, and corrected the error. This house has an atmosphere, Poirot. I don't mind admitting it unsettles me. The house or its inhabitants? Before I could answer, Dr. Finch entered the breakfast room, his face drawn with concern. Good morning, gentlemen. Have either of you seen Sir Reginald this morning? We have not, Poirot replied. He is not yet risen? That's just it. He's always the first down. Has been for the 30 years I've known him. Thompson says his bed was not slept in, and the door to the curiosity room is locked from the inside. He won't answer our knocking. Poirot set down his cup with deliberate care. The door is locked from within, you say. The key is in the lock. I could see it through the keyhole. Thompson tried calling through the door, but there's no response. Then we must not delay. Poirot rose, dabbing his lips with a napkin. Take us there immediately, Doctor. We found a small gathering already assembled in the corridor outside the curiosity room. Lady Ashworth stood pale and rigid, her hands clasped before her. Gerald lounged against the wall with affected indifference, though I noticed his fingers drummed restlessly against his thigh. Miss Strand stood apart from the others, her face composed, but her eyes betraying deep worry. Thompson, the butler, waited by the door with the stoic patience of his profession. Still no answer? Dr. Finch asked. Thompson shook his head. None, sir. I've called several times. And I've checked. The key is definitely in the lock on the inside. There is no other entrance? Poirot inquired. One window, sir, but it's 15 feet above the ground, and I've had James check from outside. It's latched from within. A locked room, I murmured. So it would appear. Poirot approached the door and knelt, peering through the keyhole. He remained in that position for several seconds, then rose, his expression grave. I see a shape upon the floor. We must break down this door at once. But the collection, Lady Ashworth began. Madame, I fear the collection is no longer our primary concern. Gerald pushed himself off the wall. Stand aside. Thompson, help me. Whatever his faults, Gerald Ashworth possessed considerable strength. With Thompson's assistance, they threw themselves against the heavy oak door. Once, twice, on the third attempt, the lock gave way with a splintering crack and the door burst inward. The scene that met our eyes was one I shall never forget. Sir Reginald Ashworth lay sprawled on the floor before the central display case, his body twisted at an unnatural angle, his face frozen in an expression of profound terror. His eyes, still open, stared sightlessly at the ceiling. One hand was extended toward the glass case that held the mysterious sphere, fingers reaching, grasping at nothing. The sphere itself sat undisturbed on its velvet cushion, its surface dark and still. "Good God!" Gerald breathed. Lady Ashworth let out a small cry and turned away. Miss Strand's hand flew to her mouth, but she did not look away. Her eyes remained fixed on the fallen man with an intensity I found curious. Dr. Finch pushed past us and knelt beside the body. His fingers sought the pulse point at Sir Reginald's neck, though we all knew what he would find. "He's dead," the doctor confirmed, his voice heavy. "Several hours, I should say. The body is cold. Rigor establishing." "The cause?" Poirot asked, moving carefully into the room, his eyes sweeping every surface. Dr. Finch examined the body with professional thoroughness, lifting the eyelids, checking the hands, the mouth. His frown deepened. "There's no obvious wound, no sign of violence. The expression suggests distress, perhaps cardiac arrest brought on by fright or exertion." "He was frightened to death?" I asked. "It's possible. His heart was not strong. I had warned him about overexcitement. But this expression—" Dr. Finch shook his head. "I've never seen anything quite like it." Poirot had completed his circuit of the room and now stood by the window. "The latch is secure, as Thompson indicated. And observe, there is dust on the sill, undisturbed. No one has entered or exited through this window." "Then how—" I began. "That, Hastings, is the question." Gerald stepped forward, his earlier nonchalance entirely vanished. "Someone must have locked the door from outside somehow, turned the key with a string, or—" "The key was in the lock," Thompson said firmly. "I saw it with my own eyes." "Perhaps he locked himself in," Lady Ashworth suggested, her voice strained. "He often worked late in the curiosity room. Perhaps he had some kind of attack and couldn't reach the door." "A possibility," Dr. Finch admitted, "though it doesn't explain what caused such terror." Poirot had moved to the central display case and was examining it with minute attention. "The sphere! It has not been taken. Sir Reginald feared for its safety. Yet here it remains." "Perhaps he died protecting it," Miss Strand said quietly. It was the first she had spoken. "He would have done anything to keep the collection safe." "You knew him well, mademoiselle?" "I have worked with him for 2 years, Monsieur Poirot. I knew his devotion to these objects. They were his life." "And now they are the scene of his death." Poirot's voice was gentle but probing. "Tell me, mademoiselle, when did you last see Sir Reginald alive?" "After dinner, when he showed you and Captain Hastings the curiosity room. I retired to my room shortly after 10 o'clock. "And you heard nothing in the night? Saw nothing?" "Nothing, monsieur. My room is in the east wing. The curiosity room is in the west." Poirot nodded and turned to the others. "And you, madame? You retired early with a headache, I recall." Lady Ashworth's chin lifted. "I took a powder and went to bed. I heard nothing until Thompson woke me this morning." "Monsieur Giraud?" Gerald's eyes flickered. "I was in the billiard room until midnight or so, had a few drinks, went to bed, slept like the dead." He winced at his own choice of words. "Anyone with you in the billiard room?" "Thompson brought me a brandy around 11. Otherwise I was alone." Poirot turned to the doctor. "And you, Sir Finch?" "I read in my room until perhaps 11:30. I thought I heard footsteps in the corridor around midnight, but when I opened my door there was no one there." "Footsteps? From which direction?" Dr. Finch considered. "Toward the west wing, I should say. Toward this room." "Most interesting." Poirot stroked his moustache thoughtfully. "Thompson, I must ask, did Sir Reginald habitually lock himself in this room?" "Occasionally, sir. When he wished to examine a new acquisition in private, he was particular about his time with the collection." "And he had no concerns last evening? No agitation?" Thompson hesitated almost imperceptibly. "He seemed preoccupied, sir. After dinner, when I brought the coffee, I noticed him reading something, a letter, I believe. He put it away quickly when I entered." "A letter?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And where is this letter now?" We searched. The desk in the corner of the curiosity room was examined, the drawers opened, Sir Reginald's pockets checked. No letter was found. "Curious," Poirot murmured. "A letter that vanishes. A room locked from within. A death with no apparent cause. This is indeed a murder most peculiar." "Murder?" Lady Ashworth's voice rose sharply. "Dr. Finch said it could have been his heart." "Could have been, yes, but the little grey cells, they suggest otherwise." Poirot's gaze swept the room once more. "Sir Reginald received a threatening letter. He feared for his safety, and now he is dead, in circumstances that appear impossible. Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidence." "Then what do you believe?" Gerald demanded. "I believe, monsieur, that someone in this house wished Sir Reginald dead, and found a most ingenious way to accomplish it." Poirot stepped carefully around the body, his attention caught by something on the floor near the display case. He knelt, producing a small envelope from his pocket, and carefully collected something I could not see. "What is it?" I asked. "A fragment, Hastings. A small thing, but in the hands of Hercule Poirot, small things become significant." He straightened, tucking the envelope into his breast pocket. "Dr. Finch, I must ask that you perform a thorough post-mortem examination. I wish to know the precise cause of death." "Of course. I'll have the body moved to—" "Not yet." Poirot held up a hand. "First, I must examine every inch of this room, every specimen, every display, every surface. The killer has been clever, but cleverness leaves traces." "And the police?" Lady Ashworth asked. "Must be summoned, naturellement. But the weather—" Poirot gestured toward the window, through which we could see thick fog blanketing the grounds. "Until it clears, we are isolated here, and that, perhaps, is to our advantage. The killer cannot escape, and neither can the truth." Miss Strand, who had remained silent during this exchange, spoke softly. "Monsieur Poirot, if there is a murderer among us, are we in danger?" Poirot regarded her with something approaching compassion. "That, mademoiselle, depends entirely upon how much each person in this room has to hide." I saw her flinch, subtle, quickly suppressed, and I wondered what secrets lay behind those intelligent brown eyes. "Now," Poirot said, his voice taking on a note of command, "I must ask everyone to leave this room. Touch nothing, go nowhere alone, and prepare yourselves, for Hercule Poirot will speak with each of you in turn." As the others filed out, I lingered by Poirot's side. He stood motionless, staring at the body of Sir Reginald Ashworth, his expression unreadable. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" "I make of it, mon ami, that we are dealing with a killer of exceptional cunning. A locked room, a death that appears natural, and at the center of it all—" His eyes moved to the sphere, sitting dark and silent in its case. "An object that defies explanation. You don't think the sphere actually killed him?" Poirot permitted himself a small smile. "Non, Hastings. The supernatural, it does not interest me. But the appearance of the supernatural, that interests me very much indeed. Someone has gone to great lengths to make this death appear impossible. The question is why? And who? Indeed, and who? Poirot's fingers brushed his moustache. The answer, I suspect, lies not in the curiosities of this room, but in the curiosities of the human heart. He moved toward the door, pausing to look back at the still form on the floor. "Rest assured, Sir Reginald," he said quietly. "The peculiarity of your death will not protect your killer. Hercule Poirot will see justice done." Chapter 3. The Impossible Scene. With the household dismissed to the drawing-room under Thompson's watchful eye, Poirot and I remained in the curiosity room. The fog pressed against the windows like a living thing, diffusing the morning light into something grey and spectral. Sir Reginald's body lay where it had fallen, a silent witness to whatever horror had transpired in the night. "Now, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice taking on that particular tone of concentrated focus I knew so well. "We examine, and we think." He began at the door, crouching to inspect the lock mechanism with minute attention. I watched as he produced a magnifying glass from his pocket, he was never without one, and studied the keyhole, the door frame, the hinges. "The lock, it is old but sound," he murmured. "No signs of tampering. No scratches to suggest the key was turned by mechanical means from outside." He straightened, gesturing for me to approach. "Observe the key itself, Hastings." I looked. The key remained in the lock where it had been when we broke down the door, a heavy iron thing, blackened with age. "It appears normal to me," I admitted. "Précisément, it is normal. And that is the problem." Poirot moved to the window, examining the latch with equal care. "Here also no signs of interference, the dust on the sill undisturbed, the window has not been opened. Then how did the killer escape?" "An excellent question. Let us consider the possibilities." Poirot began to pace, his small patent leather shoes clicking softly on the stone floor. "First, the killer was already in the room when Sir Reginald locked the door, concealed themselves, committed the murder, and then vanished. But vanished how? There is no hiding place sufficient for a person. I have examined every cabinet, every case. A secret passage? I have found none, and Sir Reginald, despite his love of the peculiar, was not a man for architectural deceptions. His collections were genuine. He did not need theatrical tricks. Poirot paused before a tall display case containing what appeared to be a mummified hand. Second possibility, the killer entered after Sir Reginald locked himself in, through some means we have not yet discovered, committed the murder, and exited the same way. But the window and door were both secured from within. Yes. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Which leads us to the third possibility, and the one I find most intriguing. Which is that Sir Reginald was not murdered in the conventional sense, that he was killed by a method that required no physical presence in the room at the time of death. I stared at him. Poison? It is possible. Dr. Finch noted no obvious cause of death. The expression of terror on Sir Reginald's face suggests a sudden, overwhelming crisis, but whether that crisis was physical or psychological, we cannot yet say. Poirot moved to the body, kneeling beside it with the reverence due to the dead. What do you see, Hastings? I forced myself to look more closely than I had before. Sir Reginald lay on his back, his arms flung wide, one hand extended toward the sphere's display case. His evening clothes were undisturbed, no signs of struggle, no torn fabric, no defensive wounds on his hands. He wasn't fighting anyone, I observed. No, he was reaching for something, or reaching away from something. Poirot gently lifted the extended hand, examining the fingers. No marks, no burns, no traces of any substance. He leaned closer, sniffing delicately. But there is something, a faint odor. I don't smell anything. Your nose, mon ami, it is not trained as Poirot's is trained. Here. He indicated the area around Sir Reginald's mouth and nostrils. "There is a trace of something bitter. Almonds, perhaps, or something similar." "Cyanide?" "That is one possibility, but the bitter almond scent of cyanide is distinctive, and this is different, subtler." Poirot rose, brushing his knees fastidiously. "We shall wait for Dr. Finch's examination. In the meantime, let us consider the evidence we have." He withdrew the small envelope from his breast pocket, the one containing the fragment he had collected earlier. Carefully, he tipped its contents onto a nearby display case. I peered at it. A tiny sliver of glass, no larger than a fingernail, curved slightly along one edge. "Glass," I said. "From one of the display cases?" "No." Poirot held up the fragment to the light. "This glass, it is too thin, too delicate, and observe, there is a residue on the inner surface. Something was contained within this glass. A small vial, perhaps, or an ampule." "A poison container?" "Possibly." Poirot replaced the fragment in its envelope. "We must search the room for the remainder of this vessel, if it exists." We searched. For the better part of an hour, we examined every surface, every specimen, every display. The collection was vast and bewildering. Preserved creatures of dubious taxonomy, mechanical devices of unknown purpose, manuscripts in unreadable scripts. Throughout it all, the sphere sat in its central case, dark and silent, seeming almost to watch our efforts. At last, Poirot straightened from his examination of a cabinet near the fireplace. In his hand, he held something small and glittering. "Hastings, see here." I crossed to him. He held the curved base of a small glass ampule, fractured cleanly as though it had been snapped open. A crystalline residue clung to the interior. "Where did you find it?" "In the fireplace. Someone attempted to destroy it, but the fire had died to embers and the glass did not fully melt." Poirot's expression was triumphant. "Now we have method. A poison contained in this ampule, administered to Sir Reginald by a means we have yet to determine." "But how? You said yourself, no one could have entered the locked room." "The poison need not have been administered here, mon ami. Consider, Sir Reginald dined with us. He took coffee after dinner. He came to this room alone, locked the door, and at some point during the night, he died." Poirot began pacing again, his fingers pressed together beneath his chin. "The poison could have been given earlier, a slow-acting substance that took effect only when he was alone. But then why is the ampule here, in this room?" Poirot stopped pacing. "That, Hastings, is an excellent question indeed." We found Dr. Finch in the library, his medical bag open on the table before him, his face grave. He had completed his preliminary examination while we searched the curiosity room. "Poison," he confirmed. "I cannot be certain of the exact substance without proper analysis, but the signs are consistent with a plant-based toxin, possibly derived from aconitum." "Monkshood," Poirot said. "Precisely." "Wolfsbane, devil's helmet. It has many names. A powerful poison. In sufficient doses, it causes cardiac arrhythmia, respiratory failure, and—" Dr. Finch hesitated. "And?" "Profound terror. Patients have described the sensation as one of impending doom. The heart races, the body trembles, the mind is overwhelmed with fear. It is—" he shook his head— "a dreadful way to die." "This would explain the expression on Sir Reginald's face," I said. "It would." Dr. Finch removed his spectacles, polishing them with a handkerchief. "The question is how it was administered. Aconitum is typically ingested, though it can also be absorbed through the skin. I found no puncture marks, no obvious point of contact." Poirot produced the ampule base from his pocket. "Does this suggest anything to you, Doctor?" Dr. Finch examined it carefully. "A small container, perhaps 20 milliliters capacity, enough for a concentrated dose of aconitum extract, certainly, but I don't recognize this specific design. It's not standard medical equipment." "No," Poirot agreed. "It is something more specialized." "Where did you find it?" "In the fireplace of the curiosity room, Someone attempted to destroy the evidence. Dr. Finch's face paled. Then this was no accident. This was deliberate murder. Mais oui, doctor. And the murderer is someone in this house. The interrogations began that afternoon, conducted in the small parlor adjacent to the drawing room. Poirot positioned himself in a high-backed chair, his posture erect, his manner deceptively mild. I sat to one side, notebook in hand, ready to record observations. Lady Ashworth was first. She entered with the rigid composure of one who has armored herself against emotion, settling into the chair opposite Poirot with precise movements. "Madame," Poirot began gently, "I must ask you some questions about last evening. You will forgive the intrusion, I hope, at such a difficult time." "Ask what you must, Monsieur Poirot. I wish to see my husband's killer brought to justice." "Your relationship with Sir Reginald, it was harmonious?" A flicker crossed her face, too quick to identify. "We understood one another." "That is not quite what I asked, madame." Lady Ashworth's hands tightened in her lap. "My husband was devoted to his collection. I accepted this when I married him 15 years ago. We had an arrangement." "An arrangement?" "He pursued his curiosities. I managed the household. We lived separate lives under the same roof." Her voice was level, but I detected an undertone of bitterness. It was not the marriage I had imagined as a young woman, but it was functional. "And the recent changes to Sir Reginald's will, you were aware of these?" Now the composure cracked, just slightly. "I was aware that he intended to leave a substantial bequest to Miss Strand. Yes." "This did not trouble you?" "Should it have?" Lady Ashworth's chin lifted. "I was provided for. The estate passes to me as his widow. What Reginald chose to do with his liquid assets was his own concern." "You were not jealous of Miss Strand's position in your husband's affections?" For a long moment, Lady Ashworth did not answer. Then, quietly, "Miss Strand was useful to my husband. Nothing more. I do not waste energy on jealousy, Monsieur Poirot." "It is an exhausting emotion." Poirot inclined his head. "One more question, madame. Last night, you retired early with a headache. Did you take any medication?" "A sleeping powder. Dr. Finch prepared it for me. I suffer from insomnia occasionally." "And you heard nothing during the night? Saw nothing?" "I slept deeply. The powder is effective." She paused. "Too effective, perhaps. Had I been awake, I might have heard something. I might have been able to help." But there was no grief in her voice, only the careful neutrality of one who has long since stopped caring. Gerald Ashworth was a different proposition entirely. He sprawled in the chair with deliberate insolence, his eyes challenging Poirot to find fault. "I suppose you think I did it," he said before Poirot could speak. "The disinherited nephew, bitter over being cut off." "It's what everyone's thinking." "And did you, monsieur?" Gerald laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "If I'd killed my uncle, do you think I'd be stupid enough to stay in the house? I'd be halfway to France by now." "The fog, it makes travel difficult." "I'd have found a way." Gerald leaned forward, his earlier nonchalance slipping. "Listen, Poirot, I won't pretend I loved my uncle. He was a cold, obsessive man who cared more about his peculiar collection than about his own family. When my father died, his brother, Uncle Reginald, barely acknowledged it. He was too busy cataloguing some new acquisition." "You resented this." "Wouldn't you?" Gerald's voice rose. "I was meant to inherit, not the whole estate, but a portion, enough to live on. Instead, he changed his will to favor that mouse of a secretary. 2 years she's been here, and suddenly she's more important than blood. You speak of Miss Strand with some hostility. I speak of her with the contempt she deserves. She wormed her way into his confidence, made herself indispensable, and now she'll profit from his death." Gerald sat back, his expression bitter. "If you want a murderer, Poirot, look at her. Look at who benefits." "And you, monsieur, you do not benefit." Gerald's eyes flickered. "What do you mean?" "With Miss Strand under suspicion, the will might be contested. The bequest to her might be invalidated. And then, who would inherit?" The silence stretched between them. I didn't kill him, Gerald said finally, but I won't pretend I'm sorry he's dead. Chapter 4. Secrets and Specimens. Miss Phoebe Strand entered the parlor with the quiet composure of one accustomed to being overlooked. She sat in the chair recently vacated by Gerald, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her brown eyes meeting Poirot's gaze without flinching. "Mademoiselle Strand," Poirot began, his voice gentle. "You have worked for Sir Reginald for 2 years, I understand." 2 years and 3 months, Monsieur Poirot. I came to catalogue the collection in September of 1934. A considerable undertaking. The collection spans 30 years of acquisition. When I arrived, there was no systematic record, only Sir Reginald's memory. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. He could describe every specimen, every artifact, every curiosity in detail, but he had never written any of it down. And now? Now there is a complete catalogue, cross-referenced, annotated, with provenance where it could be established. Pride crept into her voice. It was the work of my life, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Reginald, he appreciated this work? He did. Miss Strand's composure wavered slightly. He was kind to me, kinder than anyone has ever been. You were fond of him. It was not a question. Miss Strand's eyes glistened, though no tears fell. He treated me as a colleague, Monsieur Poirot. Not as a servant, not as a subordinate, as someone whose work mattered. Do you know how rare that is, for a woman in my position? I can imagine, mademoiselle. He saw me. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. In a house full of people who looked through me, Sir Reginald actually saw me. Poirot allowed a moment of silence to honor her grief. Then, gently, "You were aware of the changes to Sir Reginald's will?" "He told me a month ago." "I begged him not to do it. I knew it would cause trouble with Gerald, with Lady Ashworth. But he insisted." Miss Strand shook her head. "He said he wanted to ensure my future. He said the collection deserved a guardian who understood it." "He intended for you to care for the collection after his death?" "Yes. The bequest included a stipend for the maintenance of the curiosity room and a modest income for myself, enough to live independently." Her jaw tightened. "Gerald sees it as theft. Lady Ashworth sees it as insult, but Sir Reginald saw it as gratitude. And the sphere, mademoiselle? What do you know of its origins?" Miss Strand hesitated, the first sign of uncertainty I had observed in her. "The sphere is unusual, even by the standards of this collection." "Unusual how?" "Sir Reginald acquired it from a dealer in Constantinople, as he told you, but the dealer himself was mysterious. He contacted Sir Reginald directly, knowing of his interest in the inexplicable. The price was substantial, and the dealer vanished immediately after the sale." "Vanished?" "Sir Reginald tried to contact him again, to inquire about the sphere's provenance, but the address no longer existed. The name was unknown. It was as though the dealer had never been." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "And the threatening letter Sir Reginald received, you knew of this?" "He showed it to me. He was troubled, but not frightened. He said—" She paused as though choosing her words carefully. "He said that the sphere had enemies, that there were those who believed it should never have been sold." "Enemies? Did he elaborate?" "No, but in the weeks before his death, he became watchful. He checked the locks more frequently. He asked Thompson to note any strangers in the village." Miss Strand's voice dropped. "He knew something was coming, Monsieur Poirot. I believe he knew. And yet he invited guests to the house. He invited me. Because he wanted protection. He believed your presence would deter any attempt on the sphere or on himself." Her eyes met Poirot's squarely. "He trusted you to keep him safe." The weight of that trust hung in the air between them. "One more question, mademoiselle. Last night, after you retired, you heard nothing? Saw nothing?" "Nothing. My room is in the east wing, as I said, but—" She hesitated. "Yes." "Earlier in the evening, before I retired, I saw Dr. Finch leaving Sir Reginald's study. They had been speaking privately, Sir Reginald seemed agitated afterward. Agitated how? He was pacing, running his hands through his hair, something he only did when deeply troubled. When I asked if anything was wrong, he said it was nothing, but I could see it was not nothing. Poirot leaned forward. And you did not hear what they discussed? No, but I saw Dr. Finch's face as he left. He looked— Miss Strand searched for the word. Shaken, almost guilty. Dr. Harold Finch returned to the parlor with the air of a man prepared to be helpful. He settled into the chair, his wire spectacles glinting in the afternoon light, his manner professional and composed. Monsieur Poirot, how may I assist? You have known the Ashworth family for many years, Doctor. 30 years, as I mentioned. I attended Sir Reginald's father in his final illness. I have been the family physician ever since. A position of considerable trust. I like to think so. Dr. Finch's expression softened. Reginald was more than a patient to me. He was a friend. His death is a profound loss. You spoke with him privately last evening, I understand, before he retired to the curiosity room. Something flickered behind the doctor's spectacles. Surprise, perhaps, or wariness. Miss Strand told you this? She did. She noted that Sir Reginald seemed agitated after your conversation. Dr. Finch was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed, removing his spectacles to polish them, a gesture I had observed before and which I now recognized as a delaying tactic. We discussed his health, the doctor said finally. I had been urging him to reduce his activities, to rest more. His heart was not strong. But Reginald was stubborn. He refused to slow down. That is all you discussed? That is all? But Poirot's eyes had narrowed. Forgive me, Doctor, but I must observe, for a conversation about health, Sir Reginald's reaction seems disproportionate. Pacing, running his hands through his hair, appearing deeply troubled. This suggests something more than medical advice. Dr. Finch replaced his spectacles with deliberate care. Perhaps I was more forceful than usual. I told him that if he continued as he was, I could not guarantee he would survive another year. The shock of such a prognosis might explain his reaction. Perhaps. Poirot did not sound convinced. Tell me, Doctor, you prepared a sleeping powder for Lady Ashworth last evening? I did. She suffers from periodic insomnia. I have been preparing her medication for years. And the preparation, it is kept where? In my medical bag, which I keep in my room. The powder is mixed fresh each time according to her needs. So you alone have access to these preparations. Dr. Finch stiffened slightly. If you are suggesting that I suggest nothing, Doctor. I merely establish facts. Poirot's voice was mild, almost soothing. You are a man of science. You understand that in an investigation, all possibilities must be considered. Of course. But the doctor's composure had cracked, just slightly. I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I had no reason to harm Sir Reginald. He was my friend, my oldest friend. And Lady Ashworth, she is also your patient? She is. You have known her since her marriage to Sir Reginald? Since before? I attended her family in Hampshire before she married. Dr. Finch's voice grew distant, almost wistful. I introduced her to Reginald, in fact, at a charity event in London. I thought they would suit each other. And did they? The doctor's jaw tightened. They made their own arrangements. It was not my place to judge. I watched Poirot absorb this information, his little grey cells visibly at work. There was something here, some undercurrent I could not quite identify. One final question, Doctor. The footsteps you heard last night, around midnight, toward the west wing. Can you describe them more precisely? Light footsteps, quick but not running, someone moving with purpose. Dr. Finch frowned. I assumed it was Sir Reginald going to his curiosity room. He often worked late. And yet, when you opened your door, you saw no one. The corridor was empty. The footsteps had already passed. From which direction did they come? Dr. Finch considered. From the main staircase, moving toward the west wing. Not from any of the bedrooms? No, from the staircase. Poirot nodded slowly. Thank you, Doctor. You have been most helpful. After Dr. Finch departed, Poirot sat in silence for several minutes, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes half closed. I had learned, over the years, not to interrupt these moments of concentrated thought. Finally, he spoke. What do you make of it, Hastings? It's a puzzle, I admitted. Everyone seems to have secrets, but I can't see how any of them could have committed the murder. The room was locked from inside, the window was latched, and yet, Sir Reginald is dead, poisoned by aconitum, in a room no one could enter. Poirot's moustache twitched. The locked room, it is the key. We must understand how it was accomplished before we can understand who accomplished it. Could the poison have been administered earlier, as you suggested, in the food or drink? It is possible. But consider, Hastings, why was the ampule in the curiosity room? If the poison was given at dinner, the killer would have disposed of the container elsewhere. Poirot rose, beginning to pace. No, the ampule was there for a reason. It is part of the mechanism, part of how the impossible was made possible. I don't follow. Nor do I, mon ami. Not yet. He stopped by the window, gazing out at the fog-shrouded grounds. But there is something we have overlooked, something in that room that we have not yet understood. The sphere? Perhaps. Or perhaps something simpler. Poirot turned back to me. Come, Hastings, we must return to the curiosity room. There is a detail that nags at me, a question I should have asked but did not. What question? Sir Reginald's nightly routine. Miss Strand spoke of his habits. Thompson would know them intimately. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Every man of fixed habits has his rituals, and rituals, Hastings, can be exploited. We found Thompson in the butler's pantry, methodically polishing silver as though the household had not been thrown into chaos. His composure was, I thought, either admirable or suspicious. I could not decide which. Thompson, Poirot said, I must ask you about Sir Reginald's evening routine. Specifically, what did he consume after dinner each night? Thompson set down the cloth. Sir Reginald was a man of regular habits, sir. After dinner, he would take coffee in the drawing-room with the family. Then, when he retired to the curiosity room, he would take a small glass of his special brandy. Special brandy? A particular vintage he kept in the curiosity room itself, sir. A decanter on the sideboard. He was most particular about it. No one else was permitted to touch it. Poirot's eyes lit up. This decanter, it remains in the curiosity room? Yes, sir, always. And last night, did Sir Reginald take his brandy as usual? I cannot say for certain, sir. I did not attend him in the curiosity room, but the routine was invariable. Every night for 20 years, sir. Every single night. Poirot was already moving. Come, Hastings. Quickly now. We returned to the curiosity room at a pace that left me slightly breathless. The body had been removed. I was relieved to see, but otherwise the room remained untouched. Poirot went directly to the sideboard near the fireplace. There, as Thompson had described, sat a crystal decanter half filled with amber liquid, a single glass beside it. The glass, Poirot murmured. It has been used. I looked. A faint residue clung to the bottom of the glass, the dregs of Sir Reginald's final drink. We must have this analyzed immediately. Poirot lifted the glass with care, examining it against the light. If the poison was in the brandy, then the method becomes clear. The killer poisoned the decanter, knowing Sir Reginald's unbreakable habit. He drank, he died, and the killer never needed to enter the room. But the ampule was placed here afterward, to mislead us, perhaps, or... Poirot stopped, his expression suddenly intent. Or the killer did enter the room, after Sir Reginald was dead, to retrieve something. The letter, I said, the realization striking me. The letter Sir Reginald was reading after dinner. It vanished. Précisément, Hastings. Poirot's eyes blazed with triumph. The letter was evidence. The killer needed to destroy it. And so they returned to this room, took the letter, and, in haste, dropped the ampule near the fireplace, where it broke. But the room was locked from inside. Poirot smiled, that maddening, knowing smile that meant he was several steps ahead. Was it, Hastings? Was it truly locked from inside, or did we merely assume it was? I stared at him, utterly lost. Come, he said. We must examine that door once more. The little grey cells they begin to see, and what they see, mon ami, is most illuminating indeed. Chapter 5. The Catalogue of Lies. The door to the curiosity room hung at an awkward angle, its lock shattered from our forced entry that morning. Poirot knelt before it once more, his magnifying glass in hand, his attention focused on the mechanism with fierce intensity. "Observe, Hastings," he murmured. "The lock itself. What do you see?" I crouched beside him, studying the brass plate and the broken mechanism beneath. "It's been damaged by our entry. The bolt is bent." Yes, but look beyond the damage. Look at the keyhole." I looked. The keyhole was a standard design, large enough to accommodate the heavy iron key that still protruded from the inner side. Through it, I could see the corridor beyond, a sliver of wallpaper, the edge of a portrait frame. "I see nothing unusual." "Because you look, but you do not observe." Poirot withdrew a small torch from his pocket and shone it into the mechanism. "Here, Hastings. Scratches, fresh scratches, around the keyhole's interior edge." I peered closer. He was right. Faint marks scored the brass, barely visible without the concentrated light. What caused them? That, mon ami, is what we must determine. Poirot rose, brushing his knees with fastidious care. "But I have a theory that explains much, though not yet everything. Will you share it?" "When I am certain." He smiled at my frustration. "Patience, Hastings. The little grey cells, they must complete their work before Poirot speaks." We found Thompson in the servants' hall, conferring with the cook about arrangements for the household. The staff, I noted, were subdued but efficient, the hallmark of a well-run establishment that continued to function even in crisis. "Thompson," Poirot said, "I must ask you about the morning Sir Reginald was found. You said you could see the key in the lock through the keyhole. Tell me precisely what you saw." Thompson's brow furrowed. "The key, sir. It was in the lock, on the inside. I could see its shape quite clearly, the bow, the shaft." "And you are certain it was the key? Not merely something that resembled it?" Thompson hesitated. "I assumed it was the key, sir. What else would it be?" "That is the question." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the door itself, when you knocked, did it move at all? Did you try the handle?" "I tried the handle, sir. It would not turn. The door was quite firmly locked." "But did the door move? Even slightly?" Thompson considered. "Now that you mention it, sir, there was a small amount of give, as though the door was not quite flush with the frame. I assumed it was merely the age of the house. These old doors often settle unevenly." "Thank you, Thompson. You have been most helpful." As we left the servants' hall, I turned to Poirot. "What does it mean, the door not being flush?" "It means, Hastings, that the mechanism I suspected may indeed be possible." Poirot's pace quickened as we returned to the main house. "Come, we must examine Sir Reginald's study. There is something there we have not yet found." Sir Reginald's study was a smaller room adjacent to the library, its walls lined with books on subjects ranging from archaeology to zoology. A large mahogany desk dominated the space, its surface covered with papers, correspondence, and the various detritus of a busy mind. "We searched the curiosity room for the missing letter," Poirot said, moving to the desk. "But perhaps the letter was never there. Perhaps it remained here, in Sir Reginald's study, where he received it." We searched methodically. The desk drawers yielded business correspondence, invoices from dealers and auction houses, personal letters from acquaintances around the world. None matched the threatening letter Sir Reginald had shown us. "It is not here," I said, discouraged. "No." Poirot stood in the center of the room, his eyes sweeping every surface. But something else is here. Something that should not be. What? He crossed to a small writing table near the window, a delicate piece of furniture that seemed designed for correspondence rather than serious work. Upon it sat a blotter, a pen stand, and a small stack of cream-colored paper. This paper, Hastings. Observe it. I looked. The paper was heavy, expensive, watermarked with an elegant pattern. It was identical to the paper on which Sir Reginald's invitation to Poirot had been written. Sir Reginald's stationery. Précisément, but observe. Poirot lifted the stack and held it to the light. The watermark. It faces the wrong direction. I stared at him, uncomprehending. When paper is manufactured with a watermark, the design faces consistently in one direction. This stack, he gestured, has been assembled from different sources. Some sheets face left, some right. Someone has collected paper from various locations throughout the house. But why? To write letters, mon ami. Letters that would appear to come from Sir Reginald. Poirot's expression was grave. The threatening letter, the one that supposedly came from an unknown enemy? What if it was never sent from outside this house at all? The implication struck me like a physical blow. You mean Sir Reginald wrote the threatening letter himself? But why would he threaten himself? Not Sir Reginald. Someone who wished to create the appearance of an external threat, to divert suspicion away from the household. Poirot set down the paper. The letter was a fabrication, Hastings. A piece of theatre designed to make us look outward when we should have been looking inward. But Sir Reginald showed us the letter. He seemed genuinely troubled by it. Did he? Or did he show us what he had been given, believing it to be genuine, never suspecting that the author was someone he trusted? Poirot began to pace, his fingers drumming against his thigh. The question is, who had access to Sir Reginald's stationery? Who could have created such a letter? The answer was obvious. Miss Strand. She catalogued everything in this house. She would have access to paper, to correspondence files. Yes, Miss Strand is one possibility. Poirot's voice was careful. But not the only one. Lady Ashworth, as mistress of the house, would also have access. Gerald, as a family member, could obtain stationery without suspicion. Dr. Finch has visited this house for 30 years. He knows its secrets. Even Thompson, who manages the household supplies. Everyone, then. Everyone. Poirot stopped pacing. But access alone is not sufficient. We must determine motive and opportunity, and most importantly, his eyes gleamed, we must understand the mechanism. How was the locked room achieved? The afternoon had faded to early evening when Poirot summoned Miss Strand to the library. She came without hesitation, her composure intact, though I noticed shadows beneath her eyes that had not been there that morning. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, I must ask you about the catalogue you created for Sir Reginald's collection. Of course. She seemed relieved. Perhaps she had expected harder questions. What would you like to know? The catalogue, it is comprehensive. Every item in the collection is recorded. Every item, cross-referenced by type, origin, acquisition date, and location within the house. A note of pride entered her voice. It took 18 months to complete. And the sphere, the Ashworth sphere, it is included in this catalogue? Yes, though its entry is incomplete. The provenance could not be established, as I mentioned. The origin remains unknown. May I see this catalogue? Miss Strand hesitated almost imperceptibly. Of course, it is kept in my office, adjacent to the curiosity room. I will fetch it. She returned minutes later carrying a large leather-bound volume, its pages dense with handwritten entries. Poirot accepted it with reverence, opening it carefully and turning the pages with precise movements. Remarkable, he murmured. The detail, it is extraordinary. Each specimen described, each artifact documented. He stopped, his finger marking a place in the text. But here, Mademoiselle, here there is an irregularity. Miss Strand leaned forward, her brow creasing. Where? This entry, it has been altered. Poirot held the page to the light. See how the ink differs? The original entry has been erased, imperfectly, and replaced with new text. I looked over his shoulder. The entry in question described a small mechanical device, a clockwork mechanism of uncertain purpose. The description seemed ordinary enough, but Poirot was right. The ink was slightly different in color, and beneath the current text I could see the ghostly traces of earlier writing. I don't understand, Miss Strand stammered. I didn't alter that entry. I would never— Who else has access to this catalogue, mademoiselle? No one. It is kept in my office, which I lock each night. Sir Reginald occasionally consulted it, but he never made changes. That was my responsibility. And yet, here is a change, made in different ink, at a different time. Poirot closed the catalogue gently. What was the original entry, mademoiselle? What did it describe before it was altered? Miss Strand's face had gone pale. I don't know. I don't remember altering it. I would never alter an entry without documenting the change. It would compromise the catalogue's integrity. Then someone else made this alteration. Someone who had access to your locked office. Poirot's voice was soft but relentless. Someone, perhaps, who wished to conceal the true nature of one of Sir Reginald's acquisitions. But what could be worth concealing? The collection is valuable, but it is not secret. Sir Reginald showed it to visitors regularly. Not all of it, I think. Poirot rose, tucking the catalogue under his arm. There are curiosities, mademoiselle, and then there are secrets. This house contains both, and I begin to suspect that the distinction between them is what led to murder. That evening, the household gathered for a tense and largely silent dinner. Lady Ashworth presided with icy composure. Gerald drank too much wine. Dr. Finch made occasional attempts at conversation that fell flat. Miss Strand ate almost nothing, her eyes fixed on her plate. Poirot, for his part, observed everything and said little. His gaze moved from face to face, cataloguing reactions, measuring tensions. I knew that look. The little grey cells were working furiously, assembling pieces of a puzzle that remained, to me, utterly opaque. After dinner, as the party fragmented once more, Poirot drew me aside. Tomorrow, Hastings. The fog may lift, the police will come, and before they arrive, I must have my answers. Have you solved it? I have theories, but I require one more piece of evidence, one final confirmation. He glanced toward the doorway through which Dr. Finch had passed. Tonight, I shall conduct an experiment. I ask only that you remain alert. Watch the corridor outside the curiosity room. Note anyone who passes, and when. You expect someone to go there tonight? I expect nothing, mon ami, but I prepare for everything. Poirot touched his moustache thoughtfully. There is a killer in this house, a killer who has been clever, perhaps cleverer than they know, but cleverness has limits, and Hercule Poirot, he is about to discover where those limits lie. I took up my position in an alcove near the curiosity room at 10:30. The corridor was dim, lit only by wall sconces that cast more shadow than light. The great house creaked and settled around me, its ancient timbers speaking in a language I could not understand. For 2 hours, nothing happened. I struggled to stay awake, my eyes growing heavy in the gloom. Then, just after midnight, I heard footsteps. Light, quick, purposeful, exactly as Dr. Finch had described. They came from the direction of the main staircase, moving toward me, toward the curiosity room. I pressed myself deeper into the alcove, scarcely breathing. A figure passed, dark-clothed, face obscured by shadow. It paused before the curiosity room door, glancing left and right, then produced something from a pocket. A key. I watched, astonished. As the figure unlocked the door, the replacement lock Thompson had installed that afternoon, and slipped inside. For a long moment, I remained frozen. Then, gathering my courage, I crept forward and pressed my ear to the door. Sounds from within, the rustle of papers, the clink of glass against glass, a muttered curse. Then silence. The door opened suddenly, and I found myself face to face with the intruder. It was Dr. Harold Finch. Chapter 6. The Breakthrough. Dr. Finch's face drained of color as he recognized me. For a moment, neither of us moved. We stood frozen in that dim corridor, the silence stretching between us like a wire pulled taut. "Captain Hastings," his voice was barely a whisper, "I can explain." "I rather think you'd better. What occurs here, I wonder?" We both started. Poirot emerged from the shadows at the far end of the corridor, his small frame immaculate even at this midnight hour, his eyes glittering in the lamplight. "Monsieur Poirot," Dr. Finch began. "You have a key to the curiosity room, Doctor. A key you did not mention during our earlier conversation." Poirot approached with measured steps. "And you have been searching for something. Papers, perhaps? Or something else?" Dr. Finch sagged against the doorframe, suddenly looking all of his 60-odd years. "I was trying to protect someone." "Who, Doctor? Who are you protecting?" The silence stretched. Then, with a heavy sigh, Dr. Finch reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded paper. "This," he said. "I came to find this, and to destroy it before anyone else could see." Poirot accepted the paper and unfolded it carefully. I moved to his side, reading over his shoulder. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and the contents made my blood run cold. "My dearest Harold, it has been 15 years of pretending. 15 years of playing the dutiful wife while my heart belonged elsewhere. I cannot bear it any longer. Reginald suspects nothing. He is too absorbed in his curiosities to notice his wife's unhappiness or her love for another man. When the moment is right, we shall be free. I promise you this, whatever it takes. Eternally yours, Eleanor." I looked up, stunned. "Lady Ashworth wrote this? To you?" Dr. Finch nodded miserably. "We have loved each other since before her marriage. I introduced her to Reginald, hoping, foolishly, that wealth and position would make her forget me. But they did not. And this letter," Poirot said softly, "it speaks of freedom, of doing whatever it takes. These are dangerous words, Doctor. Eleanor did not kill Reginald." Dr. Finch's voice rose with desperate conviction. "She is incapable of murder. I know her. I have known her for 30 years. And yet you came here tonight to destroy evidence that might implicate her." Poirot's gaze was steady, unblinking. "This is not the action of an innocent man, Doctor. I came to protect the woman I love. Surely you understand." "I understand that you have been deceiving me since my arrival." Poirot's voice hardened. "What else have you concealed? What else have you done to protect Lady Ashworth?" Dr. Finch opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. In his eyes I saw the battle between loyalty and truth. "The sleeping powder," he said finally. "The one I prepared for Eleanor last night. It was stronger than usual." "How much stronger?" "Strong enough to ensure she slept deeply. Strong enough that she would hear nothing, remember nothing of what happened in the night." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "You drugged Lady Ashworth, deliberately, on the night of the murder. To protect her. Don't you see? If she slept through everything, she could not be accused. She could not be involved. But she could also not provide an alibi, for herself or for anyone else." Poirot stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "Tell me, Doctor, did you also provide yourself with an alibi? The footsteps you heard at midnight, moving toward the West Wing, were they real? Or were they a fabrication?" Dr. Finch's face crumpled. "They were real, I swear it. I heard footsteps, I opened my door, but the corridor was empty." "Whoever passed did so quickly. And you assumed it was Sir Reginald. Who else could it have been?" Poirot did not answer. Instead, he turned the letter over in his hands, examining the paper, the ink, the watermark. "This letter," he said, "when was it written?" "Several months ago. Eleanor gave it to me after one of our meetings. I kept it hidden in my room, but last week I realized it was missing." "Missing?" "Stolen. Someone took it from its hiding place." Dr. Finch's voice shook. "I assumed Reginald had found it, that he knew about us, but he never confronted me, never said a word. Perhaps because he did not find it, perhaps because someone else did. Poirot refolded the letter and placed it in his pocket. "Where did you find it tonight?" "In Sir Reginald's desk, inside the curiosity room, hidden beneath the blotter." "Hidden by the killer," I said. "To implicate Lady Ashworth." "Or to implicate the doctor," Poirot said quietly. "Or both. A love affair between the family physician and the lady of the house. Either could be cast as the murderer and the other as the accomplice. A most convenient arrangement for the true killer." Dr. Finch gripped Poirot's arm. "Then you believe us? You believe Eleanor and I are innocent?" "I believe, Doctor, that you have been manipulated. Both of you." Poirot gently disengaged himself. "Return to your room. Say nothing of this to anyone. Tomorrow I shall reveal the truth. And the true killer will face justice." After Dr. Finch departed, reluctantly, with many backward glances, Poirot and I returned to the curiosity room. The fog had begun to thin outside the window, and the first grey hints of dawn touched the horizon. "Do you know who did it?" I asked. "I know, Hastings. I have known since this evening, but I needed confirmation. This letter provides it." "How?" "It seems to point at Lady Ashworth and Dr. Finch." "Précisément. And that is what makes it so revealing." Poirot moved to the central display case, gazing at the Ashworth sphere. "Consider, mon ami, the killer has gone to great lengths to create confusion. A threatening letter from an external enemy, a locked room that seems impossible, evidence planted to implicate the lovers, layer upon layer of misdirection. But why so elaborate? Because the killer fears one thing above all others, the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot." He tapped his temple. "They knew I was coming. Sir Reginald had announced it. And so they constructed a puzzle designed to overwhelm, to confuse, to lead the investigation in circles." "Then the murder was planned before you arrived?" "The murder was planned, yes, but the timing was forced." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Sir Reginald's conversation with Dr. Finch last evening, the one that left him so agitated. What do you suppose they discussed?" "Dr. Finch said it was about Sir Reginald's health." "A lie, or rather, a partial truth concealing a greater revelation." Poirot began to pace. "Sir Reginald learned something that night, something that threatened the killer, something that made immediate action necessary." "The altered entry in the catalogue?" I said, the pieces beginning to connect. "Sir Reginald discovered it." "Excellent, Hastings. Yes, Sir Reginald, who knew every item in his collection intimately, noticed that something was wrong, an entry that did not match his memory. He confronted Dr. Finch, not about the affair, but about the catalogue. Dr. Finch, confused, knew nothing of it, but the conversation was overheard. By the killer. By the killer, who realized that their alteration had been discovered and that Sir Reginald would soon uncover the truth." Poirot stopped before the sideboard where the brandy decanter still sat. The poison was already prepared. Perhaps it had been in the decanter for days, waiting for the right moment. But that night, the killer knew they must act. Sir Reginald must die before he could investigate further. "The brandy," I murmured, "poisoned in advance." Yes, the killer knew Sir Reginald's unbreakable habit. Every night, alone in the curiosity room, he drank from that decanter. A slow-acting poison, aconitum, administered through the brandy, would take effect over several hours. Sir Reginald would lock himself in, as was his custom. He would drink, and by morning, he would be dead in a room locked from inside. The perfect murder. Almost perfect. Poirot's voice hardened. But the killer made mistakes, small mistakes, overlooked in the panic of hasty action. The ampule dropped near the fireplace. The letter, taken from Sir Reginald's study, but carelessly hidden. The catalogue alteration, imperfectly erased. "And the lock," I added. "You said there were scratches." "Ah, yes, the lock." Poirot smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. The most clever part of the scheme, Hastings, and also its fatal flaw. He crossed to the door, kneeling once more before the damaged mechanism. The killer needed to enter this room after Sir Reginald was dead, to retrieve the threatening letter which the killer had written to establish the fiction of an external threat. But the door was locked from inside, the key in place. So, how did they get in? They did not need to. Poirot reached into his pocket and produced a thin metal implement, a slender rod with a hook at one end. This was hidden behind the curtain near the door, a locksmith's tool used for manipulating mechanisms. But the key was in the lock. Was it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Thompson saw a shape through the keyhole, the silhouette of a key. But what if it was not the true key? What if it was a false key, a decoy placed in the lock from outside? I stared at him, uncomprehending. The mechanism is simple. Hastings. The killer waited until Sir Reginald locked himself in. Then, using this tool, they pushed the true key out of the lock from outside. It fell to the floor inside the room. They inserted a false key, just the bow and part of the shaft, held in place by this device, to create the appearance that the door was locked from within. They then used another tool to manipulate the latch, opening the door without disturbing the false key. Good God! They entered, retrieved the threatening letter, and departed. But in their haste, they dropped the ampule near the fireplace, and they failed to account for one thing: the true key lying on the floor inside the room. I thought back to our examination of the crime scene. I don't remember seeing a key on the floor. Because the killer retrieved it and replaced it in the lock before we arrived, but the scratches remain, the evidence of the tool's use, and this, Poirot held up the implement, was carelessly abandoned. Then you know who did it. I know. Poirot rose, tucking the tool into his pocket alongside the letter. Tomorrow I shall gather everyone in the drawing room, and Justice Hastings, justice shall be served. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt only a cold dread settling in my stomach. Who is it, Poirot? Tell me. He looked at me with something approaching sorrow. The person who had access to everything, Hastings. The catalogue, the stationery, the household routines. The person who knew Sir Reginald's habits better than anyone. The person who stood to inherit not just money, but the collection itself, the life's work they had spent 2 years learning intimately. Chapter 7. The final exhibition. The fog lifted with the dawn, burning away beneath a pale autumn sun that seemed almost apologetic after days of gloom. By mid-morning, the grounds of Ashworth Hall lay revealed in all their melancholy splendor, the formal gardens gone to seed, the ancient oaks shedding their leaves in slow spirals, the gravel drive stretching toward a world that had seemed impossibly distant during our confinement. Inspector Jameson arrived from the village shortly after 10 o'clock, a brisk, efficient man with a bristling moustache and the air of one accustomed to simpler crimes than locked-room murders in eccentric collectors' mansions. Poirot received him in the library, outlined the facts of the case with characteristic precision, and requested 1 hour before any arrests were made. 1 hour, Monsieur Poirot? The inspector's eyebrows rose. The chief constable is expecting a report. And he shall have one, Inspector. A complete report with the killer identified, the method explained, and the evidence presented. But first, Poirot's eyes glittered with that familiar theatrical light. Hercule Poirot must stage his final exhibition. The inspector, perhaps wisely, chose not to argue. The drawing room had been arranged according to Poirot's precise specifications. Chairs were positioned in a semicircle before the fireplace, where a modest fire crackled against the lingering chill. Heavy curtains had been drawn back to admit the pale sunlight, and the atmosphere, so oppressive during the fog-bound days, now carried an almost clinical clarity. I stood by the window as the household assembled. Lady Ashworth entered first, her composure intact but brittle, like fine porcelain that might shatter at a touch. She took her seat without speaking, her grey eyes fixed on the middle distance. Dr. Finch followed, his face haggard from sleeplessness and worry. He positioned himself near Lady Ashworth, but did not look at her, an eloquent distance that spoke of shared secrets and uncertain futures. Gerald Ashworth slouched in last, affecting his usual indifference, though I noticed his hands trembled slightly as he accepted a cigarette from the box on the side table. His eyes darted around the room, never settling, never at rest. Miss Strand entered quietly, as was her habit. She took the chair nearest the door, an unconscious choice, perhaps, or a calculated one. Her brown eyes met mine briefly, and I saw something flicker there. Apprehension, certainly, but also a strange resignation, as though she had already accepted what was to come. Thompson stood by the door, his butler's impassivity firmly in place. Inspector Jameson positioned himself near the fireplace, notebook in hand, his expression one of professional skepticism. And at the center of it all stood Hercule Poirot. He had dressed with particular care for the occasion, his suit immaculate, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his moustache waxed to perfect symmetry. He surveyed the assembled company with the air of a conductor about to lead an orchestra through a complex and demanding symphony. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft but carrying, "we are gathered to unveil a truth that has lain hidden beneath layers of deception, misdirection, and carefully constructed illusion. The death of Sir Reginald Ashworth was not merely murder, it was a performance, a theatrical piece designed to confuse, to mislead, and ultimately to conceal the identity of the killer." "Get on with it," Gerald muttered, but without conviction. "Patience, monsieur. The truth, it cannot be rushed." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "Let us begin at the beginning. Sir Reginald Ashworth was a collector of the peculiar, the inexplicable, the strange. For 30 years he assembled objects that defied conventional understanding. But among his curiosities, one stood apart, the Ashworth sphere." He paused, allowing the name to hang in the air. "Sir Reginald acquired the sphere 3 months ago from a dealer in Constantinople. The circumstances were unusual. The dealer contacted him directly, the price was substantial, and after the sale, the dealer vanished without trace. Shortly afterward, Sir Reginald received a threatening letter, warning him that the sphere had been stolen and demanding its return." "The external threat," Lady Ashworth said. "You mentioned this before." "I did, madame, and I was meant to believe it. We were all meant to believe it." Poirot's eyes swept the room. "But the threatening letter was a fabrication. It was written here, in this house, using Sir Reginald's own stationery, collected from various locations to create the appearance of authenticity." I saw Miss Strand's hands tighten in her lap. "The letter served 2 purposes. First, to establish the fiction of an external enemy, someone outside the household who might have reason to harm Sir Reginald. Second, to explain why Poirot had been summoned. When the murder occurred, I was meant to pursue shadows, to investigate a phantom threat while the real killer walked freely among us." "Then who wrote the letter?" Gerald demanded. "Who's behind all this?" "Patience, monsieur. We approach the heart of the matter." Poirot moved to the center of the room. "Sir Reginald died in the curiosity room, alone, behind a locked door. The key was in the lock on the inside. The window was latched from within. By every appearance, no one could have entered or exited the room after Sir Reginald locked himself in." "An impossible crime," Inspector Jameson said. "So it appeared, but Hercule Poirot does not believe in the impossible. He believes only in the improbable and in the ingenuity of murderers." Poirot produced the locksmith's tool from his pocket, holding it up for all to see. This device was hidden behind the curtain near the curiosity room door. It is a locksmith's implement designed for manipulating lock mechanisms. Dr. Finch leaned forward. "You're saying someone used that to open the door?" "More than that, Doctor. I am saying someone used it to create the illusion of a locked room." Poirot's voice took on a lecturing quality. "The mechanism is elegant in its simplicity. After Sir Reginald locked himself in, the killer waited. When sufficient time had passed, when the poison had done its work, they approached the door. He demonstrated with precise gestures. Using this tool, inserted through the keyhole, they pushed the true key out of the lock, and it fell to the floor inside the room. They then inserted a false key, merely the bow and part of the shaft, held in place by a small device to create the silhouette visible through the keyhole. With another tool, they manipulated the latch mechanism, opening the door without disturbing their decoy. "Good Lord," Gerald breathed. The killer entered the room. They retrieved the threatening letter from Sir Reginald's pocket, the letter he had been reading after dinner, the letter that troubled him so deeply. They placed it in the desk, hidden beneath the blotter, intending to dispose of it later. But in their haste, they made errors. The ampule that had contained the poison concentrate was dropped near the fireplace, where it broke, and the true key, lying on the floor, Chatit, had to be retrieved and replaced in the lock. "But there were scratches," I interjected, "around the keyhole." "Precisely, Hastings. The tools left marks, fresh scratches that revealed the manipulation. The killer was clever, but not clever enough to account for every detail." Poirot replaced the tool in his pocket. "And so the impossible locked room is explained. It was never impossible at all. Merely an illusion, like so much else in this house of curiosities." Lady Ashworth's voice cut through the silence. "You've explained how, but you haven't explained who, or why." "Ah, madame, the who and the why, they are connected as always." Poirot's gaze moved slowly across the assembled faces. "Let us consider the suspects. Lady Ashworth, you had motive, a loveless marriage, a husband absorbed by his collection, a secret passion for another man. Dr. Finch's letter, found hidden in the curiosity room, speaks of your desire for freedom. Whatever it takes, you wrote damning words." Lady Ashworth's face went white. "I didn't. That letter was stolen from Harold's room." "Indeed it was. Stolen and planted to implicate you, or perhaps to implicate Dr. Finch, your lover, who had both motive and medical knowledge to commit such a crime." Poirot turned to the doctor. "You knew Sir Reginald's health was fragile. You had access to poisons, and you were seen, or rather, heard, moving through the corridors at midnight." "I've explained that," Dr. Finch protested. "I heard footsteps. I opened my door." Yes, the footsteps. We shall return to those." Poirot shifted his attention. "Monsieur Gérald, the disinherited nephew, bitter, resentful, desperately in need of funds. Your gambling debts are substantial, are they not?" Gerald's face flushed. "How did you—" "The little grey cells, monsieur. They observe everything." Poirot waved a dismissive hand. "You had motive, the hope that Sir Reginald's death might lead to the will being contested. You had opportunity. You were alone in the billiard room until midnight, with no witness to your whereabouts. But you lacked something essential: knowledge. You did not know Sir Reginald's nightly routine. You did not know about the private brandy decanter. You did not know the intimate details of the household that would have been necessary to execute such a precise crime." Gerald sagged with relief. "Then I'm cleared?" "You are not the killer, monsieur, but you are not entirely innocent either. Your debts, your resentments, your bitter words. These created an atmosphere of suspicion that the true killer exploited." Poirot's voice hardened. "You are a pawn, Monsieur Gérald. Nothing more." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the one person who had not yet been addressed. Miss Phoebe Strand sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. Only her eyes betrayed her, dark pools of awareness that followed Poirot's every movement. "Mademoiselle Strand," Poirot said softly. "The invaluable assistant, the devoted cataloguer, the one person in this house who knew every item in the collection, every routine of the household, every secret hidden within these walls." "Monsieur Poirot," she began, "you loved Sir Reginald. This I do not doubt. But your love was complicated. It was not the love of a woman for a man, but the love of a curator for a collection. Sir Reginald was the guardian of treasures you had spent 2 years learning, cataloguing, understanding, and in his will he promised that guardianship to you." Miss Strand's composure cracked, just slightly. "He wanted me to protect the collection, to ensure it survived him. And you were grateful, truly grateful. But there was a problem. Poirot reached into his pocket and produced the leather-bound catalogue. This, your life's work, your masterpiece of documentation and organization. But within it, there is an alteration, an entry that has been erased and rewritten. I explained that. You explained that you did not alter it. And I believe you. You did not alter the physical entry. But you knew what had been changed, did you not? Because you were the one who discovered the truth about the sphere? Miss Strand's face went pale. The Ashworth sphere, Poirot continued, is remarkable. It responds to touch, but only to certain touches. Sir Reginald demonstrated this for us. When he touched it, the patterns moved. For everyone else, it remained inert. He paused. But this was not always the case, was it, mademoiselle? Silence. When the sphere first arrived, it responded to no one. Sir Reginald was disappointed. He had paid a fortune for an object that seemed merely decorative. But then, one day, it awakened. The patterns moved, the mechanism activated, and Sir Reginald was delighted. What changed? Inspector Jameson asked. An excellent question, Inspector. What changed was the composition of Sir Reginald's blood. Poirot's voice dropped. 3 months ago, Sir Reginald began taking a new medication, a tonic prepared by Dr. Finch to address his heart condition. This tonic contained trace amounts of certain metallic compounds, and these compounds, absorbed into Sir Reginald's system, created the precise electrical signature that activated the sphere. Dr. Finch started. You're saying my medication made Sir Reginald the only person who could activate the sphere? Yes. An unintended consequence, but a fortuitous one for Miss Strand. I stared at Poirot, struggling to follow his reasoning. But what does this have to do with the murder? Everything, Hastings. Poirot turned back to Miss Strand, whose face had gone grey. Mademoiselle Strand discovered this connection. She noted the timing. The sphere's activation coincided with Sir Reginald's new medication. Being a woman of intelligence and scientific inclination, she investigated. She tested, and she realized the terrible truth. The sphere was not magical. It was not inexplicable. It was merely a sophisticated mechanism that responded to specific chemical signatures. And Sir Reginald couldn't know this, I said slowly, because it would destroy the mystery, the very thing he valued most. Précisément, Sir Reginald had built his life on the pursuit of the inexplicable. The sphere was his greatest treasure, an object that defied all rational explanation. If he learned that it could be explained, that it was merely science rather than mystery. Poirot shook his head. His world would crumble. Miss Strand spoke at last, her voice barely a whisper. I couldn't tell him. It would have destroyed him. And so you altered the catalogue. You removed the entry that documented the sphere's original inactivity, replacing it with a false record that suggested it had always responded to Sir Reginald's touch. You buried the evidence of your discovery. To protect him? Perhaps. At first. Poirot's eyes were sad. But then Sir Reginald noticed the alteration. His memory was too precise, his knowledge of the collection too intimate. He saw the change, and he began to ask questions. Miss Strand's composure shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face. He confronted me, that night, after dinner. He demanded to know what I had hidden. I tried to explain. I tried to tell him it was for his own good, but he wouldn't listen. He said he would investigate himself. He said he would learn the truth. And the truth would have destroyed not only his illusions, but your position, your inheritance, your future guardianship of the collection. Poirot's voice was gentle but inexorable. If Sir Reginald discovered that his greatest treasure was explicable, that his beloved sphere was merely a clever mechanism, he would have questioned everything. The catalogue you created, the expertise you claimed, the devotion he believed you possessed. I did devote myself to the collection, Miss Strand cried. Every waking hour, every ounce of my energy, I loved those objects more than... She stopped. More than Sir Reginald himself, Poirot finished quietly. Yes, I know. And that love, that obsessive, consuming love for things rather than people, is what drove you to murder. He was going to ruin everything. Miss Strand's voice had gone flat, drained of emotion. 30 years of collecting, 2 years of my work. All of it questioned, doubted, dismissed because of one stupid sphere that shouldn't have mattered. And so you poisoned his brandy. You knew his nightly ritual. You had documented every habit, every routine, every preference. Aconitum, dissolved in the decanter. A slow-acting poison that would take effect over several hours. Sir Reginald would drink, as he always did. He would lock himself in, as he always did. And, by morning, he would be dead, Miss Strand said, and the secret would die with him. But you needed to retrieve the letter, the threatening letter you had written to establish an external threat, a letter Sir Reginald had kept, and which might reveal your handwriting to a careful investigator. So you waited. You listened for the household to settle. And, at midnight, using the locksmith's tools you had obtained, you entered the curiosity room. The footsteps, Dr. Finch breathed. The footsteps I heard. They weren't going toward the room, they were coming from it. You had already been inside, mademoiselle. You had retrieved the letter, planted Lady Ashworth's love note to implicate the obvious suspects and reset the lock's illusion. But you dropped the ampule, and you left scratches on the mechanism. Poirot shook his head. Small errors, tiny oversights, but enough to unravel your careful construction. Miss Strand laughed, a harsh, broken sound. I should have known. I should have known that Hercule Poirot would see through it. Sir Reginald invited you to protect himself, and even in death, he succeeded. The little grey cells, mademoiselle, they do not rest until truth is found. Poirot nodded to Inspector Jameson. The evidence is complete. The method is explained. Justice must be served. The inspector stepped forward, his manner professional but not unkind. Miss Phoebe Strand, I am arresting you for the murder of Sir Reginald Ashworth. You are not obliged to say anything, but anything you do say may be given in evidence. Miss Strand rose from her chair with quiet dignity. Her tears had dried, and something like peace had settled over her features. The collection, she said, turning to Poirot. Will it be preserved? Will someone care for it? That, mademoiselle, is not for Hercule Poirot to decide, but I suspect that Sir Reginald's curiosities will find new guardians, perhaps ones who understand that some mysteries are best left unsolved. She nodded slowly, accepting this final judgment. Then she allowed Inspector Jameson to lead her from the room, her footsteps fading into the silence of Ashworth Hall. Later that afternoon, as our motor car wound back down the long drive, Poirot sat in contemplative silence. The hall receded behind us, its towers and gables shrinking into the distance until they vanished entirely behind the ancient oaks. A sad case, I ventured. All murder is sad, Hastings, but this one, yes, there is a particular tragedy here. Poirot sighed. Mademoiselle Strawn truly loved the collection. Her cataloguing work was brilliant, meticulous, comprehensive, a genuine contribution to scholarship. In another life, she might have been celebrated for it. Instead, she'll hang for murder. Perhaps, or perhaps the courts will show mercy, given her obvious instability. Her obsession with objects over people suggests a mind not entirely balanced. Poirot shook his head. But justice is not Hercule Poirot's domain, mon ami, only truth. And the sphere? Was it really just a mechanism responding to chemicals? Who can say? I offered an explanation that accounted for the facts. Whether it is the true explanation... Poirot smiled mysteriously. Some mysteries, Hastings, are better left to wonder. The world needs its curiosities. I thought of Sir Reginald, lying dead before his greatest treasure, his face frozen in terror. I thought of Miss Strand, whose love for strange and beautiful objects had consumed her humanity. And I thought of the sphere itself, sitting dark and silent in its case, waiting for a touch that would never come again. There is no greater crime, Poirot murmured, almost to himself, than to kill for silence. Truth, it has a way of emerging, no matter how deep we try to bury it. The motor car reached the main road and turned toward London. Behind us, Ashworth Hall disappeared into the autumn haze, taking its secrets with it. But not all of them. Never all of them. And so concludes Murder Most Peculiar, a tale of obsession, deception, and the dangerous love of beautiful things. Sir Reginald Ashworth sought to collect the inexplicable, but in the end it was human nature itself that proved the greatest mystery of all. Thank you for joining us on this journey through shadows and secrets. Until next time, remember, the truth is always stranger than fiction, and the little grey cells never rest. Good night.